On today's edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the featherweight fight coming up here September 23rd as part of UFC Fight Night Fiziev Gamrot. Of course, I'm talking about Bryce Mitchell, Dan Ige. This one's going to be a good one. And if you've never watched a show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles, and I'll give you my pick at the end. Some of this stuff may have relevance. It may not. I just like looking at a lot of different angles when it comes to previewing fights. Let's do a quick tail of the tape between these two. Bryce Mitchell, Thug Nasty. You can see they're 15-1. Dan Ige, 17-6. 28 years old to 32. 5'10" to 5'7", 70-inch reach to 71. So Ige with the reach advantage, Mitchell a little bit taller, and Ige a little bit older as well too. Let's start first with Bryce Mitchell, who looks to bounce back from his first official loss in the UFC against Ilia Topuria. So you can see there, Bryce Mitchell, 15-1 record. He's got no knockouts. He's got 9 submissions and 6 decisions. He's the number 11th ranked featherweight. He is 28 years old, like I mentioned there, 5'10" with a 70-inch reach. So he's 3 years younger and has a 3-inch height advantage in this fight. He is a BJJ black belt. He's got performance of the night 1 time against Matt Sales. He's got fight of the night 1 time against Bobby Moffett. Mitchell made his amateur debut way back in November of 2013, which he ended up losing by submission. Made his pro debut January 2015. Didn't make his UFC debut until 2018 in July. That was part of the Ultimate Fighter 27. And you see there, he ended up losing on the Ultimate Fighter to Brad Katona, who's just back in the UFC now, which is interesting. Mitchell is 6-1 in the UFC. He's got 1 submission victory. He's got wins over some notable wins that he has in his UFC career include Andre Fili and Edson Barbosa. Some losses include Ilia Topuria, and we'll include Katona on here as well, but he's only got 1 official loss, and that was to Ilia Topuria in his last fight, which was back in December. Mitchell's had a few layoffs in his career. Going from Tyler Diamond to Bobby Moffett, there was a 260-day layoff, 260 that is. And going from Andre Fili to Edson Barbosa, there was a 490-day layoff. And then going from Ilia Topuria to Dan Ige, there was a 287-day layoff. So second longest layoff in his UFC career will be taking place when he heads into fighting Dan Ige on September 23rd. He's had a couple close fights. Let's go back and look at that fight against Tyler Diamond, which was a majority decision. Tyler Diamond now in PFL. If you look on the media scorecards in that one, 6 media members scored the fight for Bryce Mitchell, 7 scored it for Diamond, 1 scored it a draw. So that was back in July of 2018. Again, that fight could have gone the other way in that matchup. There's the Bobby Moffett fight, which is a unanimous decision. That was back at UFC on ESPN Plus 6 in March of 2019. 12 media members scored the fight for Mitchell, 2 scoring it for Moffett. So again, most people felt like Bryce did win that fight, but there were 2 media members who thought that Moffett did enough to get it done. Let's look at Bryce Mitchell's stats in the UFC. You can see there he's got a significant strikes landed per minute is 2.48, which is a bit on the lower end. His striking accuracy is at 59%. His striking defense is at 57%, so doesn't get hit that much. And his takedown average is 3.26. His takedown accuracy, though, is only 44%, and his takedown defense is 33%. We'll see if Ige shoots for any takedowns here. But we'll have to see there. And his submission average is 1.7. So again, some encouraging stats here in terms of the takedown average and the submission average as well. So there you go. That's pretty much everything you need to know about Bryce Mitchell, one of the most interesting characters on the UFC roster. And this is a fight that's been brewing with Dan Ige for a while. So happy to see this come to fruition. But now let's turn our attention to Dan Ige, his opponent, 50K Dan Ige, that is. As you can see there, Dan Ige, 17-6. He has got 5 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 7 decisions. He's 32 years old, 5'7" with a 71-inch reach. So he'll just have a 1-inch reach advantage in this fight. He's currently the number 13 ranked featherweight. He's a BJJ black belt and a brown belt in judo. Ige's got performance of the night 3 times against Danny Henry, Gavin Tucker, and Damon Jackson. He made his amateur debut way back in September of 2011. He fought another guy with the last name Ige, which is interesting. Had his pro debut in June of 2014. At his UFC debut in January of 2018, a fight he ended up losing against Julio Arce. So interesting, Ige makes his UFC debut a few months before Mitchell makes his, but Mitchell filming The Ultimate Fighter. Ige's UFC record is 9-5. Now, people might not think that's great, but you got to look at who he's fought, and we'll go over that in a second. He's got 4 stoppage victories. Some notable wins include Edson Barbosa, and we'll put Nate Landwehr on there as well, just because Nate's like a fan favorite. But outside of that, some of his wins, I guess Bektik at the time was 13-2. Maybe that was a better win, but I feel like Bektik was a bit on the decline at that point. But Barbosa for sure was probably the biggest win he had at the time. And Nate Landwehr was just a dominant victory in his last fight as well. So we'll count those. But look at these losses here. These are some of the best fighters in the weight class. Did lose to Julio Arce. it was his debut. I'll give him a pass for that one. But Calvin Kattar, that was a decisive win there. The Korean Zombie, that's a fight looking back now. Dan probably should have won. Josh Emmett, tough fight there. Close one. We'll talk about the scorecards on that in a sec. And then got absolutely dominated there by Voliev, who is looking like the future of this division. So not necessarily a bad loss there as well. So got to look at the fact that Dan Ige certainly battle tested. Now Ige's only had one layoff in his career, going from Calvin Kattar to Gavin Tucker. There was a 241-day layoff, but other than that, nothing too major. He's never had any major injuries either. Now let's talk about some of the close fights here that Dan Ige has had. We'll go first to the Mirsad Bektic fight, which is a split decision win, UFC 247, February 2020. 10 media members scored the fight for Ige, 2 scored it a draw, and 1 scored it for Bektic. So again, majority did feel like Ige deserved the nod there. But the Edson Barbosa fight's interesting. I remember watching that at the time thinking Barbosa's got this, and they gave it to Ige. Now, I went back and looked at the media scorecards for that. That was UFC on ESPN 8 back in May of 2020. 2 media members scored the fight for Ige. 16 media members scored the fight for Edson Barbosa. So maybe that one doesn't go Ige's way, but nonetheless, he ended up losing the fight after that against Calvin Kattar. So again, maybe that's a fight that should have gone his way. And then if we look at the Josh Emmett fight, kind of the opposite, right? Josh Emmett, UFC 269, December 2021. 7 media members scoring the fight for Emmett, 6 scoring it for Ige. So that's one that maybe could have gone his way. Unlike the Barbosa fight, which did go his way. So, yeah, he's had a couple close fights. And one thing to his credit with Dan Ige, look at this resume here. It's never been finished. It's pretty impressive. There's something with those Hawaiian fighters, man. Max Holloway, Dan Ige, a lot of these guys, they got iron chins for the most part. Let's go look at some stats for Dan Ige here. So you can see Dan Ige's significant strikes per minute is actually higher than Bryce Mitchell, 3.96. His striking accuracy is at 45%, which isn't great. Striking defense is at 57%. His takedown defense is at, his takedown accuracy, I should say, is at 26%. Average takedowns 1.15. I don't think he'll want to go to the ground here anyways with Mitchell's ground game, although he is good on the ground himself. And his takedown defense is at 56%. I think in all likelihood, this fight is going to stay standing and it will not hit the mat anytime soon. Let's get to the odds. We actually don't have any odds for this fight yet at the time I'm recording this. I'm not sure which way they're going to go, to be honest. Mitchell's more of a fan favorite. Maybe they go that way. Mitchell's ranked higher. Maybe they go that way. Again, Mitchell's only got 1 loss, but that loss he had was pretty one-sided. I mean, Topuria had his number, and granted, we're talking about a guy in Topuria who's likely, or is very much in the conversation of fighting current featherweight champion Alex Volkanovski next. So not a terrible loss to have on the resume, so to speak. But if you look here on Tapology, it's actually interesting. A pretty wide margin here. 73% picking Bryce Mitchell, 27% picking Dan Ige. So which side am I going on this one? And let me just preface by saying that I'm a big fan of the guy I'm going to be picking against here. So it's got nothing against me not liking a certain fighter, but I'm actually going Dan Ige here. And, again, when the odds come out, if Ige is an underdog, I will definitely be taking a look at that because I just think Dan Ige's durability is going to make things very difficult in this fight. I think on the feet, they're pretty much even. I would give maybe even a slight edge there to Dan Ige in terms of the striking. Saying that, Mitchell, looked pretty good in the fight with Edson Barbosa. I mean, if you want to compare opponents, Mitchell fought Edson Barbosa a lot better than Dan Ige did. I don't think Dan Ige beat him, and Bryce Mitchell clearly beat Edson Barbosa. So if you want to use that's something we could sort of look at. But yeah, I think it really does come down to who's the better striker. Like, I don't think Mitchell will get Ige to the ground. Conversely, I don't think Ige is going to take him to the ground. I think it stays standing, and I think Ige's got a bit of an advantage. And remember, it being a 3-round fight, I could see Ige landing a little bit more damage on the feet. He's a little bit more powerful, I think, than Mitchell. I mentioned there, Mitchell doesn't have a single knockout win. Ige has, how many knockout victories? He's got a few. He's got 5 knockouts. Granted, a lot of those outside the UFC, but still. Like I mentioned there, Ige never been finished in 23 career fights. Mitchell's has a layoff coming into this fight. I mentioned it there, 287 days. Did not look competitive at all against Topuria. Was that an off night? We're going to find out in this fight. I don't know. It's tough to say. Maybe Bryce isn't that good, or maybe he just had an off night. I know he said he was, he had the flu or whatever, but it certainly didn't look very competitive, and that was a bit concerning there as well. I'd argue as well that Ige's fought better competition. They both have fought Edson Barbosa, but you look at Ige also fighting Calvin Kattar, the Korean Zombie, Josh Emmett, Voliev. Those are all better opponents than the majority of guys that Mitchell's fought. Mitchell's fought Barbosa and Topuria. That's pretty much it as far as top flight opposition. Feely's one of those guys that's kind of hovering around the rankings. I wouldn't really put that as a quality win per se. Like I mentioned there, it's a 3-round fight, so I don't think we'll see a finish here. If this was 5 rounds, I might feel a little bit differently. And Mitchell also in his last fight, let's not forget, he talked about retirement. that was a bit worrisome, right? First loss, and again, it was a fight that he was not very competitive in. When you hear anyone talking about retirement, that's not a good sign when it comes to picking fights as well. So we'll see how he looks in this fight. Not to mention he's coming off some injuries. Remember, he's supposed to fight Jonathan Pierce. He's supposed to fight Voliev. Both those fights did not come to fruition for Bryce. Yeah, sorry. Actually, I have to step back on something. I said Mitchell only had the injury against Feely. He had the back injury against Voliev as well. So that's a back injury going into this fight. Coming off that's tough to deal with. So again, my pick's going to be Dan Ige by decision. I think if you want to play it safe here, just take the fight goes the distance, because I don't think we'll see a finish here, and I could see it maybe being a tricky decision. We've seen Ige, like I said, on the proper side on his end with getting a win over Barbosa, but then we've seen the other side where really close fight with Josh Emmett goes the other way. So I'm leaning towards the decision here. Now, can Mitchell win? Yes. Maybe I'm being a little bit too hard on him in that Topuria fight, but he just did not look good in that fight. And I think with Ige, he's never really looked terrible other than maybe the Voliev fight. But even then, I think a Voliev would beat a lot of guys in that weight class. So kind of tough to say here, but I'm going to be going with Dan Ige by decision to get it done. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Which way are you leaning on this fight? Who you picking? Let me know what you think. Again, I'm not counting out Bryce in this fight, but I just think Ige's got a little bit more momentum. He's tough to finish. It's a 3-round fight, and I think he's the better striker. That's kind of what this breaks down to. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.